Now, with the season coming to a close, everyone is already talking about transfer news. And under Andrea Berta, it is quite clear that Arsenal are doing a lot of their business in front of people's eyes. With that being said, the latest links are with bynoe-gittens. And in this video, we're going to talk about why Arsenal are looking to sign him and what he could bring to the club if this transfer was to go through. So let's get into it. Now, I'm not really surprised about the recent transfer news around Arsenal. It seems like every single week there's a new player that comes to the limelight. It was Dean Howson last week, it was Woklz a few weeks ago, and now it seems like bynoe-gittens is a player that is becoming on our radar. Now, first of all, it's a player that I'm very aware of. I've watched a lot of his games back in Dortmund over the Champions League and the Bundesliga season because I'm personally a fan of that league and that team overall. So I thought I would have a good indication of how he is good enough for the team and also some of his weaknesses as well, so I thought I'd make this video to clarify it. Now, first of all, I do want to say that you've got to take everything with a pinch of salt. I don't discredit the fact that Arsenal are probably looking at him because I do think there's certain levels that we are, and Andrea Berta is someone that we do need to emphasize does do his business in front of people. He likes people seeing what he's doing to get agents on his side or sort of to put pressure with the fans on them to make the deals happen. So it's definitely something you've got to think about because there is going to be a lot of players just thrown at the wall that we're going to see over the next couple of weeks. So it's just something to keep aware. Now, the thing that is good about this straight off the bat is that Arsenal are at least looking at different targets in that wing position. We've seen Arsenal look at many strikers, a few midfielders, and even a few defenders. But something I've been very critical of with Arsenal, it just seems like we have one target that we want, and if we don't get them, we give up, which I do think has caused us to have a pretty poor season overall. And if you can't get Nico Williams for the price and the amount of money he wants per week, at least look at other options because there is at least some good left wingers out there in the market, I believe. Now, straight away, bynoe-gittens is a player that is 20 years old and has got a lot of experience for Dortmund. Recently, he hasn't really been a starter since Nuri Sahin got sacked and Kovac came in, but before that, he was a player that was quite favoured on that left wing position, even though they have a lot of attacking players at that Dortmund side with varied results this year. Now, at certain points this year, there was definitely arguments to say that bynoe-gittens was the best English winger on form. I definitely think on that left side no matter what, and I think in that Christmas period he really did excel as a player. Now, he hasn't necessarily hit the heights and he is still very young, so he's not going to be necessarily a finished product, which is something we have to address, but I still think that even though he hasn't got many goals and assists since January, you can't really look at that with the given the minutes he has played and the player that he is overall right now, so we do have to consider that. Now, first of all, let's talk about the major positive with bynoe-gittens, and that is his dribbling. It's no doubt about it, I've spoken about it multiple times, that Arsenal need a player that can dribble and at least take players on, because we've seen the success of Martinelli doing that at least a little bit more. He's not the best dribbler in the world, but at least he's confident to take them dribbles at the moment, but he hasn't been in his entire time at Arsenal. And given our pace in our front line, which isn't a lot, and given the fact that Saka's a bit of a stop-start dribbler, so he will take his time, he's more intelligent than quick, I think Arsenal on that left-hand side specifically need someone that is going to pick the ball up and run at players with incredible dribbling. Now, Gittens has the best dribbling out of Williams, Martinelli, all of them combined. I would say this is his most elite attribute, and his dribbling is world class in my opinion. He has this ability to go left foot or right foot. He's quite two-footed in many ways, and he's very patient with his dribbles, but also very direct. He gets into the box, he's very good at coming from wide areas, which you see Arsenal wingers pick the ball up a lot, and move into them channels into the box where he can create and make some great dribbles with players around him. This as well with his incredible acceleration. He is really fast, like I don't want to discredit it, he is rapid and he gets in behind with incredible pace, making him insane on transitions. This, and when a player comes across, he can dribble past them and take his time and usually even put it near post or far post, which is something we spoke about with Martinelli, which we want him to kind of have a bit more variance in his shot, is something that bynoe-gittens has. He has a few different capabilities with his shooting, and that's where his dribbling really comes into play, so he can get into these shooting areas. And the stats do prove this as well. He makes 5.5 progressive carries per 90 because he is so quick and so great on them transitions. He can pick the ball up from deep and just run, which is a really effective thing to have as a winger. But his biggest stat and the biggest thing that is definitely a major point in the transfer is his 3.6 successful take-ons per 90. He has nearly 4 successful dribbles per 90 as well, which is in the top 1% of wingers in Europe because no one else is doing it at that level. And when I say this guy just sometimes cannot get tackled, I mean it. not only does he have that combination of pace and that dribbling of just going either way, being able to go past anyone, he has that core strength. Now, he's not the strongest player in the world and he's not necessarily going to push people off the ball, but he's good enough and he's strong enough to keep a separation between him and the defender to allow him to get his moves with his dribbling. But also, more importantly, if there's a 50-50, maybe two shoulders up against each other, he is strong enough to hold off players and keep the ball in his possession, being a very good player at retaining possession as well. Now, per game, he actually has around 8 dribbles, so he's around successful about 47%, 50% of the time, which is actually really good, especially for a 20-year-old. This should not necessarily be discredited from him. He's not going to win all of them all the time, but I like this ability he has to cut inside and then kind of do like this fake shot technique where he baits a player towards him and then will go onto the byline, which is something that has been very successful in him getting shots away within the box at over 2.5 per 90, which is a decent level, not the best, but it's probably going to be improved with a team that has the ball more, you have to think, and at least shows that sort of willingness to cut inside and shoot and have at least a bit of a variance in shots, which I do think is that platform that you can have to develop into the future. Now, I think his shooting isn't necessarily the best right now, and I do think there are some problems with it. However, I do think he has the platform and the level of shooting that you can see the different techniques, and even you look at some compilations of his goals, they're quite different sometimes, and I do think he has that sort of patience within the box, which can help as well, where I think he has a big enough platform to actually be able to move that into the future. Compared to Nico Williams, I would say that Nico Williams probably scores more goals than him, but I will say that Nico Williams is 2 years older and there's obviously a lot of things going on with him. I think Gittens is a better dribbler than Williams, and I do think within the box he is better at getting away shots. I think Nico Williams is a little bit unselfish compared to Gittens, who still has that sort of mark of wanting to shoot all the time, which arguably Arsenal have needed. We don't have players that shoot anywhere near enough, especially with the dribbling level that this guy has. But I do think there's the differences between the players that are quite similar but can also be interpreted in different ways. Now, another positive about this is that because he is so good on the transition, I still think Arsenal are going to try and transition a little bit more. People may discredit it and say that's not how we play, but we've seen over the last couple of months and weeks that Arsenal have really tried to, not necessarily all the time, but be a little bit more of a transitional based team in certain ways, especially from like goal kicks and corners where we catch the ball and can get that ball out. I think that might be an idea of the future. I think this is why maybe Gyökeres is linked more than other players. Maybe that's a way we're seeing to move the future. And if you get Gittens in, I do think he's a player you want in these situations. In my opinion, though, he is quite similar to Martinelli, but does some of the things that Martinelli does a little bit better and a little bit worse. I mean, he's probably a better final third player. He keeps his head down, but he looks up when he dribbles and is a much better dribbler. But there is certain levels where there is similarities, such as where they both get to the byline, will do a good dribble, get to the byline and cross. Both the times, you know, Martinelli doesn't have the worst crossing ability, but never really goes to anyone because he got his head down, he's not really looking. Now, this is where Gittens does struggle and keeps his head down. He keeps his head down when he gets to the byline and then crosses it in, and this is a lot of the time leads to these floated crosses not really going to anyone on that Arsenal team. Of course, he's so young, you can definitely develop this, and it comes down to maybe some intelligence or decision making in the final third. I think can definitely be better, but at his age, I think that's something you expect and would at least be willing to improve on. It's not something that you're really going to be concerned about at a 20-year-old player. You would expect them to get better, but obviously it may not always work like that. And I do think another real big negative of him is he isn't great at pressing and being one of them sort of players. Now, he is 20, and I do want to emphasize that a 20-year-old player can always develop. If you're like 23, 24, 25, that's when you sort of understand what the player is going to be and where their capabilities lie in at least their attributes that they have. They still may be good and develop, but they may just be the player that you see nowadays. 20-year-old isn't like that. They can still develop and still get better, and I do think Gittens can learn how to be a bit more intense when defending and pressing because it's not very great at the moment. And I do think in a team that has the ball a lot more compared to maybe a transitional based style like Dortmund do kind of like emphasize a little bit more, it could be a way in order for him to understand that he will get the ball a little bit more than he's used to, and also he has to press to win it back, which could be a different thing. But if we are to get Gittens and keep Martinelli, maybe there's an idea of Martinelli starts in certain games, especially against the big teams, because he is going to press and run back very well and be deeper, but then you bring Gittens on as that final third later on player that you need to bring something, because he is just 20 years old and he isn't going to necessarily be a starter every week. And I do think a good coach can definitely teach him to be better in these certain aspects, and I think starting him more and him playing more will get better in a better team. And this is kind of where I'm at with the Gittens situation. I think if Arsenal want to buy him for around £40 million, which is the rumours, about 40 to 45 mil, which I think is actually a relatively decent price for a homegrown talent let's not forget he is English. It will just help the squad, and it won't take him too long to really bed in with the team. And I do think Gittens in his mind will probably want to play for England, which the best way to do that is playing for an English side. Unfortunately, that's just how it has been for a very long time. And I do think Gittens will know that his dribbling is a lot better than Martinelli, which already is a great asset that Arsenal do need within their team. They need people to take more risks, to be better dribblers, and to be better in these areas. And I think Arsenal have shown a great progression with a lot of players, where he is one of them players that I do think can really fit into that system. The funny thing is, though, he really does remind me a little bit like Nicola Pepe. I would say he's a lot quicker than Pepe and maybe a little bit stronger, but he has that same dribbling aspect, and how he dribbles is very similar. And he also has that same ability to cut in and shoot, obviously on the other side compared to Pepe, to score their worldy goals, which you will see now and again, which Arsenal have been asking for an X factor, which at 20 this guy has a little bit of and can definitely develop into more. The problem is, I think Arsenal's whole thing right now has been we need a win now system. I don't think Williams is a win now system either, but I do think he's a little bit better than Gittens right now. He is a bit older, he's going to cost a lot more on the wages, and I do think Gittens in very many ways is quite similar to Martinelli. I do think he's a bit of a final third demon compared to Martinelli, but he isn't going to put that defensive work up, which is important, as much as some people want to discredit it and say wingers should not have to defend, which is just simply not true. Look at Real Madrid and where they're at because of that. And I do think if you're comparing him to Williams, it may be a better transfer than that, and I will not necessarily discredit that. I do think that's a very valid point, but I also think maybe there's better wingers you can get to buy a win now. And I said on Twitter that I think if we get him, I would rather Arsenal buy another winger as well alongside him, to sort of at least give him time, or at least buy another winger that can versatilely play. Like, Gittens is two-footed technically, but he is quite reliant on that right foot, especially recently. Especially most of his goals come from that right foot, which I still think causes problems for Arsenal in the future. Now, of course, it's a very complex situation. I think Gittens is a very good player, and I do think you should be excited for him if he comes to Arsenal. And if he is a replacement for Trossard, one in, one out, then I don't hate that. He's obviously 10 years younger, a lot better potential, and has that really great dribbling that makes him that potential to be that star, which in my opinion he has that platform to be. Of course, there is definitely better left wingers out there. I mean, Rodrigo, Leao, you could argue, but these players may not fit the system, or may just be simply too expensive. With given the fact we need to buy a lot of other positions, I believe, I do think that is fair enough to buy a young star like this, in my opinion, to develop, and I wouldn't hate it at all. I think the more you look into it, the more there's a lot to love. But of course, I'm not going to just sugarcoat it and pretend he's the best player in the world, and he's even going to be a starter. Martinelli will still start over him a lot of games, you will see, which maybe Gittens can push him out and get better and develop more. But at the age of 20, I don't know if he's going to come in and be that natural first team player that you expect him to be. And I want to be honest about my opinions about Gittens, because I don't want to pretend he's the best signing in the world, and then a few months down the line when he hasn't done anything, criticise him. I don't think that's very fair. And he has weaknesses. Every player has certain weaknesses, you could argue, and I do think it's very good to highlight them as well. But I still would be excited with him nonetheless. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments, more importantly, and your opinions as well. If you've watched Gittens or haven't, I would recommend maybe looking a little bit more than the compilations, because I think the compilations are obviously going to focus on the best bits of him, and I think the best bits of him right now are incredible. There's quite a lot of low points as well, and there's a reason why he isn't starting for Dortmund at the moment. Thank you guys nonetheless. See you guys in the next few days. Hopefully we can meet PSG, of course, and thank you guys for watching.